talk about our experience at US Foods with Delphix. And by design, this talk is intentionally not try to explain what Delphix is or its internals and things like that, because there's some much better presentations out there that do that already on Delphix's website and Kyle's blog and different things. But instead, I thought I would just kind of go through our experiences, and I've organized it in a way that I hope will be helpful in terms of sort of things we learned, good things we saw, problems, and that sort of thing. And I definitely encourage and would be happy to have questions. And I think also with Kyle here, who is a very knowledgeable person about Delphix, together perhaps if there's something I can't cover, he could, or he might generate a question. So I encourage that, and I'm happy to have interruptions. They're not really an interruption. So I thought I would start out with an explanation of introducing myself and my company, and then sort of the development environment into which we used Delphix initially. So my name is Durrett. I think Kyle mentioned that. I'm sort of a general purpose Oracle database administrator. I've been working with PeopleSoft and Oracle for 20 years, and since the last 10 years with US Foods, I worked with a wide variety of systems, data warehouses, different transactional systems. And I'm very interested in Oracle performance tuning. I follow a lot of the guys on the oak table, and I've learned a ton from them, and it's just an area of real interest of mine. And about US Foods, we're a pretty big company. We're the second largest food distribution company in the United States, with about $20 billion a year in revenue and about 25,000 employees, so pretty big. And the key thing you need to know about food distribution that relates to our project with Delphix is that food distribution essentially boils down to suppliers and customers. So the suppliers provide us everything a restaurant or cafeteria would need to produce meals, and we gather those into our distribution centers and send them out to our customers, who are mainly restaurants and schools and hospitals. So the context of the Delphix project is that we had a big application on our mainframe that we intended to move off onto Unix and Oracle. It was related to supplier incentives, so our suppliers-related app. And because of some synergies between that and this large existing customer-related app, or customer allowances application, we decided to put the suppliers application on top of the same database that our customer's app was using. And both of these applications had the same most important characteristic in terms of performance. They both had to run these really heavy batch processing jobs over the weekend. And take the data that was collected throughout the week, process it over the weekend in time for our Monday morning reporting that was needed, and just our online system had to be updated with the previous week's data. So the key thing in this project was to make sure that the new suppliers application, which was essentially a bunch of batch processes primarily, that they would finish over the weekend to test that. And it was critical as we move it off the mainframe that it worked correctly. But the other challenge is that the existing customer-related application was struggling to meet its batch deadlines. We had query tuning and different issues to try to get it to finish. And so the concern was not only could we develop this new application that finished in time over the weekend, but would it impact the existing application in terms of the added load on that database server. So in order to talk about our use of Delphix, the reason we brought in Delphix was to help us improve the quality of our development and test environments. And again, in the context of this project, to make sure that the batch processes were ran in a timely way, as well as having up-to-date data to work on to get the correct results, as well as the performance. Before I talk to you about Delphix, I wanted to just talk about how, before we use Delphix, or our systems that don't, how do we do development and testing how do we keep the data in our test environments up to date so that we get realistic testing. And the thing we want to avoid is moving our project to production and having it, return wrong results or just perform poorly. And so in our current system, we have a string, essentially, of dev, QAT, and production. So development, create new tables and package changes in development. We migrate it to QAT, which is a little more production-like in size, and then finally to production. And the tools we use to update our data in QAT to keep it in sync with production is just Oracle's export-import utilities or data compilation. And the challenge with this refresh method is that to fully refresh our QAT system for a 6 terabyte database can take days. And so it's not really feasible. Plus, to save money, we really didn't want to allocate enough disk space on our SAN, an expensive disk space, to have a full size of production for dev and QAT. So our typical development and testing environment, our existing customer's application, which is an example of the way, in general, at US Foods we do development and testing, is we have subsets from dev and QAT, and we use export-import sort of on an ad hoc basis to refresh certain tables or maybe arrange partitions so that whatever process was being tested had up-to-date data relative to production. And feel free to stop me. I get on a roll and start talking, but I'm happy to answer questions. So before we had Delphix, for this new suppliers project, we were going to pursue the same approach we had for our existing databases, except unrelated to Delphix, unrelated to this project, we added the wrinkle of a new database in our string for development and testing. We added system integration test database. So now there'd be 4 databases, and the migration path would be, dev to SIT to QAT to production. So for the suppliers project, pre-Delphix, they requested a new dev and SIT database, which is a number of terabytes of additional data, of additional expensive storage, plus just to catch the customer's app string up to the same pattern, they asked for a new SIT database for the customer side of this application. So it was going to be a lot of additional disk space, and our refresh method would have just been the same, export-import, kind of on an ad hoc basis. So then, at that same time, we came across the idea of using Delphix. And I thought I would just explain how we came across that product. I was at the time in a technical architect mentoring program with the senior vice president in our area. And one of the projects for the mentoring program was to research a new technology and to present it kind of with pros and cons against different other technology options. And for me, I told you I'm interested in performance tuning, so I kind of cringed at the idea of researching some technology that was totally unrelated to Oracle or performance or anything. So then I came up with the idea that we maybe could improve our testing environments and our refresh method through some kind of physical copy or clone of our production databases. My reasoning was that A, it would probably be faster than doing a full export-import, so you're more likely to do it, and it would definitely be more accurate in that it would be identical byte-for-byte copy of production. The data in the tables and the indexes, all the blocks would be organized in the same way as they are in production. So I had in mind, I had not heard of Delphix, I had in mind stuff like in our storage system. I knew there were ways we could have a mirror of production, data disks, split it off and attach it to another host and use that as for testing, maybe something like that, or using RMAN or DataGuard. And so I presented this idea to my mentor, and he said, that sounds really promising. He handed me this paper about Delphix and said, why don't you research this? And so that's really how I was introduced to it. I'm not sure where he heard it, but he's kind of a high-up executive, and he gets all kinds of products that he's introduced So that's where we started, and I went through the whole process of presenting it, and Delphix was accepted as a project. And so this represents our initial setup using Delphix, and it's kind of a mirror of what we had previously planned to do with the physical SAM. And we had 5 new databases, dev and SIT for customer and supplier, and then a QA team, which they both kind of flowed into. So we really weren't planning to do anything different than what we were going to do before, except we had Delphix as the back end. And so, that was the initial thought anyway. But it did save us a bunch of disk space, which was one of the concerns originally, how much disk space we had to pay for to support these 3 new databases. And in this case, all 5 of these, which are about 20 terabytes, fit into the 8 terabytes of physical storage that was connected to our Delphix machine. So it was a storage savings right from the beginning. And the last thing I want to say, by way of introduction, is in these 5 databases we created, we made the choice to use HP Unix's virtualization, which turned out later to be an interesting choice. But anyway, for all the reasons you like virtualization, like with VMware, we wanted to use HP Unix's virtualization as well as Delphix's. So essentially, for each of the 5 databases, they had their own HP Unix virtual machine, which was nice because they were all separate environments that could be configured in their way. So that's my introduction. I was going to pause here just for a second, because I can talk in a mile a minute. Is there any questions at this point of what I've talked about? Thoughts? This is the last benefit. And again, stop me whenever you want to. The last of the 3 benefits I want to talk about is how, after we got Delphix set up, I showed you our original 5 databases, which we kind of set up just like we would have a physical database, not thinking about how you might use it differently, use Delphix databases differently. But then after we got into the process of actually starting to work on the project, I worked with the solution architect who was the lead of the development team, and we started talking, what options do we have with Delphix? What would you like to see? And together, we came up with an approach that really helped them in their development process. So what we did is, Larissa would tell me, okay, I need a snapshot of production as of this weekend at this time, typically, Sunday night or Monday morning after the batch process is finished. And this was for their testing, a good point in the business cycle where the data on the production system was the way they would want it to be for their testing. And so then I took that snapshot and put a long retention on it so it wouldn't get cleaned up or anything. And we created a database we called SITV1. I just version 1, version 2 for our system integration test database. And the way that developers wanted to use SITV1 was to take, we broke the project into major releases. So they had developed a bunch of code changes, packages, tables, table changes or new tables, and they wanted to apply that to SITV1. And once they'd done all that work, to take a snapshot of V1 and bring it down. So that was a preserved, sort of pristine copy of the production data, plus all of the release changes. And then we're able to create a second version of SIT called V2 and bring that instance up. So there's only one of the versions of SIT up using memory, an instance that's running at any one time, but you can have multiples of them on the disk. And it takes a small amount of additional disk space to have all these copies. So that's a difference from our original plan of just having an SIT database sitting there. And this was a big benefit to them because they could use their V2 database as sort of a scratch pad, run through their updating batch processes, make manual updates to try to figure things out and fix things. And they didn't have to worry because they knew we could at any time drop that V2 and recreate it. We eventually had, I think, up to V6, where we got to certain points they wanted to save stuff for a while and then start using another version. So we used the ability to not only clone production, but to again, I want to pause and give you any an opportunity to ask me questions. Sure.
So the ease that suddenly you have 300 copies.
Right.
No one knows what to use for.
Sure. It's a good question. So the question is, you have the problem of producing all these different copies of production, and it's hard to manage because of that. In our case, I could see how that could happen, and I think maybe other customers struggle to manage that depending on their environment. In our case, it was so controlled because it was one project, and a lot of and at this point, I'll mention it later, we haven't given the development team the ability to create their own. Not that we don't want to, but just the way it's worked out, I've been, I and the other database team members have been the main ones doing it. So we've kind of controlled it. I mean, the only thing I really cared about, I care about keeping track of which database has what, but the main thing I was concerned about is space, because make sure that we don't fill up the space. That's really the main limiter. How many we create that, and how many instances are up. Because we only have a certain amount of memory that physically you can have up. You can have a bunch of them down on different versions of SIT as long as you have the disk space to support it. And so in this case, it was pretty simple. I mean, we basically had this. Yes, the developers really were using two of those files: the development database and the SIT database. And so that wasn't that much different. And the SIT database, they knew what the different versions were and what they were using it for. But I had the environment set up so that whichever database was up was the one that was SIT. And so we had the infrastructure around it to support it. And our team knew. I don't know, it's a long answer. But your point is good. I think the more you did. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
But this means you have production and all the SI QA in the same data center, or is this applied on a standby software recovery site, or?
Right. Yeah, this is all in our same production data center.
Okay, so you do the whole development in the same data center.
Right. That's just the way. That's how big we are. What we refer to right now.
And in the production database, there's no sensitive data that need to be clean for all the dev teams to see?
Very good question. And the truth is that we just don't have the resources to do it.
Okay, and like, the company's fine with that?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we're pretty lean as far as our database team and everything, and security, data masking, all that is just a luxury for us. No one wants it to be that way, but we have copies of our payroll data, financial data, all that's wide open to the developers. That's not true. I should tell you that. I don't know. No, yeah. But it's a good point. And if we got serious about data masking, and those kind of security issues, it'd be the same issue with our non-Delphix systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I appreciate the question.
They're all snapshots, no codes.
Say again.
These are just snapshots of production and lay it down rather than clones of full-size clones.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully grasp what you're saying. Yeah, the snapshot is a Delphix term for which basically under the covers is, correct me if I'm wrong, is a, what do you call it, incremental RN backup. And so really when I say a snapshot of production, it's the latest incremental backup, which then when I create SITV1 from that snapshot, it's really all the disk data blocks from the original production full RMAN backup and any of the incrementals layered on top of that, so that it's really a full copy of production. Does that make underneath the covers, it's like a deduplication thing. Underneath the covers, Delphix is keeping track of all the different blocks from the various backups of production. And basically it spins you up a view of those blocks that appears to you as if you have a full database. You can go to the NFS mounted file.
Yeah, I guess I'm not completely clear whether you've got a full copy, so size-wise, would your SIP-V1 be the same physical size as production, or is it a delta of changes from production?
It appears to you that it's a full copy of production. As of the time of that snapshot. The snapshot is, if you're familiar with database, a particular SCN, particular committed change or time. It's just like doing an RMAN incomplete, or well, an RMAN restore and recover to that point. It's the same sort of results apparent to you.
As far as the data, Delphix sends a full copy of the source data onto its managed data. There's a full copy. It's compressed about 1 page a side. And then they clone from there. When I make a clone, there's no copies. We give you a new pointer to choose. So the clones are free. And if the clone modifies something, we'll restore that extra modification.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's kind of part of the challenge of me skipping the introduction to Delphix and how it works is that you kind of have to pick that up along the way. So the next section, oh, sorry, did you have a question up there?
Oh, yeah, basically, if I understand correctly, if I understand correctly, so you continue using the production blocks, right? The production data blocks, right?
Say again?
The production data blocks, this is what you continue using in the testing environment?
Right, the copy of them.
Okay.
So what happens when you first connect Delphix to production, which in our case is set up to run once a day, it runs an incremental RMAN backup. And so those blocks are maintained, those production, copies of production blocks, compressed, are maintained within Delphix's store. So that at any time you can, for the range of blocks, you can pick one of those snapshot times to spin up a copy of production.
Okay, but is that going to impact the performance of the production? Assuming in the test environment I'm going to run some huge Cartesian join of like
Oh yeah, no, it doesn't
several
affect,
hundred gigabytes of data.
it's a good question. It does not affect production.
No?
Because it affects production no more than an RMAN backup would. When you first spin up a connect source database, a production source to it, it does a full RMAN backup, level 0 backup. So whatever overhead there is in doing a full backup, we do those every day in a lot of our databases. And then after that, every day it does an incremental. But once the data is pulled from production, all your development and testing work is against the blocks that are stored within, Delphix. Delphix is a virtual machine which has some physical storage, and within that is all the I/O and everything is. So it doesn't impact production. Long answer for a short question.
Thank you.
So how similar is this solution to like a ZDLRA?
Say it again.
How comparable is this solution to a ZDLRA?
All right, Kyle, that's yours.
You can save it to the end if you want.
What's the ZDLRA?
Zero data loss recovery flight.
Oh, well, as far as I understand, I haven't talked to this year, but the recovery plan is quite different. I mean, it's pulling in, you can't make the same clones with the recovery plan, so we pull a physical clone with the recovery plan.
Yeah, it's right, but you got
If
the.
I have a 6 terabyte space and I want 5 copies of it, then that's 30 terabytes I have to pump out of the fabric.
Understood.
And in this case, if I want a copy, there's no data movement.
Okay.
I mount an NFS share off of Delphix and give pointers, and there's no data movement. If you modify it, you only see the modification. We store that modification separate from what originally existed, so all the other copies aren't affected.
I follow. Okay.
There's a competing Oracle product, but it's not that. It's something completely different. Snap clones and stuff.
Oracle's got about 5 different ways. Oracle
Yeah.
has there's EB clone, which I talked about here, and Connor and McDonald talked about last year. There's a SMU, which is stored in a snapshot management utility with ZFSSA. There's the snap clone, which you mentioned in Enterprise Manager. Exadata has some snapshot technology built in on But none of them are automated like this. They're just sort of piecemeal. And also, in the Oracle world, you know, one of those is going to win, the rest of it will lose. So we want to pick the right one.
Sorry, we had a question over here. I'm sorry, I'm really not very good hearing. Do I use RMAN? Yeah, we do. Yeah, you know, it's a good question. The question is, do our existing RMAN backups interact or interfere with the Delphix ones, and they don't. And I was a little worried about that because you have to enable block change to our normal backup system, but it hasn't. Second.
Yeah, Delphix option will collect logs.
Yeah, we have it set up to the archive logs. Yes, we have it set up kind of the default setting, so it's like 7 days worth of snapshots, and the archive logs, I'm going to mention that later actually, but the archive logs between the two. So for example, my production recovery example had to, if you tail the alert log while it's running, it did a restore and then it applied the archive logs. All right. Okay, sorry.
Just as an aside, you talk about batch jobs. You're still doing batch jobs.
It's primarily, almost all the time it's on batch. Yeah. But it's basically a weekend processing over the weekend, and some of it's pretty critical for in fact. So,
Because people don't talk about batching anymore,
yeah.
as if it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, maybe we're in the dark ages. I mean, we still have Oracle 816 that we have to keep running. So, like I said, we're lean. You know, we don't just upgrade everything and patch everything and tune every query. You know, that's not going to happen. So, all right. So I'm going to cruise ahead a little bit here. I'm doing good on time. I've got a few slides at the end if we have to do. I really care less. So, on the challenges section, I want to talk about some problems we had with the installation. And, you know, a lot of this was self-inflicted and not necessarily an issue with the Delphix product, but it's something that's good to know, I think, for someone who may be in a similar situation. The first thing is that we had this huge rush to get Delphix in. You know, it took months for everyone to get together and decide to make a purchase and do this project. And then all of a sudden we had 2 weeks to put it in. And of course we had this brand new, it was the first 10 gigabit network hardware we had at our company. So the network team had to just rush and put it together. And we also, not realizing how much disk space exactly we were going to use, it turns out that our SAN at that time didn't have enough of the higher speed disks. So we originally set up Delphix on this nearline storage, which caused all kinds of slowness issues. So you know, the challenge, again, if I go back to our main point, we had a supplier's application with the batch jobs. You know, we want those to know, but especially the first release, people were really nervous about this project. They weren't sure that it was really going to work. Just the development of it, having to return the correct results, as well as the performance of it. So when they start running their testing on these really slow disk drives, it wasn't helpful to them because they needed a more realistic test. And then during our setup, again, we didn't have time to evaluate this or fix it. We noticed these high ping times between the HP Unix virtual machines and the Delphix virtual machine. And those were kind of dismissed later. Killed us. And the last sort of weird installation problem was we started using Delphix, and there would be these network sort of hang-ups for minutes, and it would cause our database instance to crash due to some sort of a timeout. The Delphix support worked us through that and came up with some new parameters that caused the network flow control to be better, and that problem never occurred again. So, you know, it was a bumpy start. I sort of started out with all the rosy positives. And so then the second challenge we faced was even after fixing the network flow control, we still, we couldn't run the full batch schedule against the supplier's database without the system just grinding to a halt. We just weren't getting the network throughput we needed. And this was for the first release, so it was critical that it was tested so we made the decision to move the final testing onto our our physical QAT database. So the neat thing is Delphix fast clone feature made this easy to do. What I've done before, supporting development, is to make a copy of a database in development, just bring the instance down, copy all the data files and control files and review logs somewhere else, and bring it up and rename it. And that's a simple way, a really simple way to make a copy of the database. And Delphix honestly has some features to automate this, which I didn't use at this time. But in order to, what Delphix did do was take the database the users, the developers were heavy working on, the SIT database. All I had to do for it is take a snapshot of it and bring up a copy of it and call it test or Bobby or something like that, and then bring that instance down. And effectively, it was the same scenario where I've got all the data files and control files and everything on this NFS-mounted file system, and the instance is down. So then I just copied those files, used an FTP to the physical database, renamed it, and voila, it was really easy. And the first release completed on that system. So yeah, we were still struggling with our network performance issues, but the fast cloning feature was a great way to work around it easily by making a copy of our SAP system. Then, after that first release, working with our HP Unix team and HP support, we came up with a way to improve the performance of our network link. And ultimately the problem was, it's not a Delphix issue, but an issue with HP Unix's virtualization. Their virtual network switch was the bottleneck in the connection between the virtual machine and the Delphix virtual machine, HP within Delphix. And so our Unix team came up with these commands to run to connect the SIT database, where all the heavy batch processing was going on, directly to one of the two ports on the our 10 gigabit network adapter. So from that point on, the SIT virtual machine, the SIT database, had the network performance it needed for the next two releases. So that was an interesting solution. And then the last challenge I want to list is a little more technical. So even after we resolved our network performance issues and we're starting to get really good throughput and latency, we still had certain batch processes which ran much more slowly on the Delphix PDB than production. And you got to understand, this is, same plan, same data, same code, same statistics, same CPUs, same amount of memory, and yet it ran for 10 times as long. And that, again, was a problem because we're trying to make sure these batch jobs run not like the time. And the reason is that, at least on HP Unix, Delphix requires you to use direct I/O. And our production database does not use direct I/O. So, and the reason, and direct I/O is a configuration setting that I've used a number of times in the past to greatly improve performance, and it's recommended in a number of cases. But this was sort of the first scenario that I've run across where it really dramatically decreased performance. So I'm trying to illustrate with this picture, in the boxes and the lines, the scenario that resulted in direct I/O running so much slower. And so the definition of direct I/O is that you're bypassing the Unix file system memory cache. So in a normal Unix program that's accessing data on the disk, a file, the first time you read it, it just reads it from the disk. The second time, it could be cached in memory and run a lot faster. But in an Oracle database, it's just a Unix program, and the database files are just files in Unix. So it would use the same cache. But at least on HP Unix, if you configure the file system a certain way, set certain database parameters, it will bypass that cache. And Delphix has some certain settings in the way the NFS file system is mounted that forces you to use that. So, so that's fine. And production is using a cache, and so Delphix is not. So really, Delphix is sort of represented by the bottom two lines, and our production system is represented by the top two lines. But the other thing that we need to understand, in order to understand why it ran so much slower, is that this particular slow query or TLSQL package was doing a lot of direct path reads. And a direct path read is a feature of Oracle's optimizer, our database, to choose to bypass the database's buffer cache. Just like Unix, the database has a memory area, and when you read data from the disk the first time, it can be cached in memory, and the next time you read it, it's faster. But if you have a large table that you're doing a full scan of, or a large partition, it can be more efficient to just skip the database cache, because you probably won't be rereading those blocks anyway, or they're so big, it'll fill up the cache and move all these other more important things out of it. So it's a good feature. But in this case, in the problematic situation, which represents the line on the bottom, our long-running batch processes were scanning the same partition over and over and over again. And in production, that partition gets cached in the Unix level, but on our Delphix system, which is the line in the bottom, it doesn't get cached. And so if you look at the weights for direct path reads and everything, you'll see that it's 10 or more times longer to just keep reading over the network versus to redirect it from the local memory. So that's the last challenge, and I think it illustrates. Okay, good. Go ahead.
So it's the way HPUX handles direct IOs is quite different than the way, say, Linux does. So would you have the same problem under Linux, or is it specifically HPUX?
Say it one more time.
So Linux natively handles direct IO, right, whereas HPUX doesn't. So would you have the same problem in Linux? I don't think so.
I think it's pretty similar on Linux, honestly. We've got Linux and HP systems. Huh?
Yeah.
Sal, do you want to interject?
Yeah, I mean, Unix is pretty much like this. I mean, I think Delphix on HP might require direct IO, but we don't. It's not required on all platforms. So I don't. Linux doesn't require it, although you can use it. But if you use it, this is how it's going to work.
Yeah, and even if you have a system where you could work around this, and maybe I could on HP if I knew the right set of commands to do, which I did try some things. At least you need to know that this might happen, right? And be aware of it. But in Linux, I've used Linux with this done direct IO and without it, and done a bunch of performance testing on it. I think it works the same way. Yeah, there's a few differences in Linux and HP in terms of some other features like asynchronous IO. In Linux, you can use asynchronous IO with a file system. You can on HP, you can just drop. But in direct IO, it's pretty much pretty similar.
So basically, the point is whether it's HP, Unix, or Linux, that direct I/O may have some advantages in some things, but disadvantage here.
Right.
With doing direct I/O.
And you want
just
that
because it is HP, Unix for you, you have to use direct I/O. That's not necessarily the case for other.
right. And if nothing else, I think it's useful to know this, to be aware of it, right? You can just see, are you in the situation where your production system is not using it?
So if you had the option, if that be possible, to not use direct I/O in Delphix on HP Unix, would you turn it off?
Sure. Oh yeah, I tried to.
And you think that would then that would then help your these patch points because they could have used the Unix cache.
Right.
But would it have hurt other things?
Well, no, I don't think so, because you're trying to make it as similar to production as possible, right? And so by turning direct I/O off, it would have been a more realistic environment. I thought on Thursday I was working on this, I was thinking, oh gosh, I'm here at Oak Table, I've got all these sharp performance tuning people. Maybe there was some clever thing I didn't think about, and I thought, well, I know there's a way to discourage the database from doing direct path reads. There's certain internal parameters. Maybe if I bump that up on my Delphix database, it wouldn't do direct path reads. And that would change the behavior of a lot of other things. And that's, so, but if I could get it to not do direct I/O, that would really be just like it is in production. So, but this is the kind of thing that's important, with Delphix. I know they've gone to a lot of trouble to not have Delphix introduce changes in behavior or performance in your our case was an example of where it introduced a difference in behavior. Yeah.
So does that mean that because Delphix is doing NFS or text or doing a lot of,
Right.
so if you were my shop doing NFS all the way through,
Right.
NFS block.
Right, and it's funny, I don't know what company you work for, but I talked
So
to,
you get NFS.
yeah, right, exactly. And
You do NFS today,
exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I talked to a customer there, you know, right in that same office park where I work in Phoenix, that does the same thing. And they already had all their network set up right to use NFS for production, and for them it was, you know, it was really easy to support Delphix. Yeah. So, and you know, so again, this is kind of our case, which may not apply to everybody, you know.
And besides this direct I/O thing, Delphix has compressed the data, so it does not store so much, use so much storage. Have you seen general performance issues that since it has to decompress, which are related to?
Nothing that I could measure or notice. No. Yeah, the question is, does the compression slow down? You know, our Delphix database, our Delphix virtual machine has 8 virtual CPUs, and the CPUs is hardly taxed. So, you know, if that system started to get bogged down, then maybe, and that's a CPU level thing, right? It's not I/O. But yeah, no, we haven't noticed any. Honestly, I haven't noticed any negatives to using Delphix that I've measured in some problem case, except for the direct I/O, and then just the issues with our network, you know, which you can go, or even the slow disks we originally started with. You can go and look at the weights and, you know, how long does a single block read take, and those kind of things. And so I've done a lot of that kind of analysis. The only thing I've noticed so far is the reads very high.
You try to set up the Delphix so that it simulates your production environment as closely as possible.
Right. Right, exactly. And in fact, on the SIT database, it has the same amount of, the same size SGA and PGA, same number of CPUs, you know, same version of Oracle, of course. So it's pretty similar, except that, you know, the direct I/O is a big difference, you know, so.
Are you using direct NFS for the Delphix systems?
I think it does, yeah. I think that's the way it's set up. Yeah, it's funny. It's been like a year or two since I did all this. I've forgotten all the exact things, but I think it uses direct. Right, the database connects to that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm almost out of time. So I'm going to just to the conclusion, which is not a problem. So I better sit here because I can see it. So bottom line was this initial project succeeded. It moved off of the mainframe without any major problems. We had 3 major releases, and it was a success with the performance that we needed. We also, as a side benefit, got this recovery in really a remarkably short time, and that was very valuable for us. We learned a lot about the importance of having low latency, high bandwidth network connection between your Delphix virtual machine and your database servers that host the virtual databases. And at least in our environment, it is using direct I/O, so that's something to be aware of. But consistently, the thing that really strikes me about Delphix is the ability to take the 6 terabyte database and make a copy of it in 15 minutes. We don't have any other way to do that I'm aware of, not without a lot of additional disk storage and other configuration. So it's been a really valuable tool to us, and I've tried to give you an overview of our ups and downs and challenges. So thank you.
One quick thing. This afternoon, 1:30 to 4:30, we're doing labs at the round room, which is the first room in the Creativity Museum. Where we're going to be installing Toad, for example. So if you've never had Toad, you